Welcome to Fear Spiral, where the ordinary twists into the unimaginable. Here, you'll hear stories of people who vanished, shadows that follow, and places that shouldn't exist. Every night, we bring you true-style horror encounters told in first person, real, and terrifyingly believable. From desolate highways to haunted cabins, from silent apartments to fog-covered forests, nothing is quite what it seems. Stay with us, if you dare, because once you enter the fear spiral, reality may never feel safe again. Subscribe and face the fear. This Halloween, we bring you 10 chilling stories, all from the Appalachian Mountains and beyond. You'll meet hikers who disappeared into the fog, hitchhikers who vanished without a trace, cabins that knew your name, and roads that simply ceased to exist. Every encounter is told in the first person, every detail as real as it can be. Watch closely, listen closely, because some things you see and hear in the dark may follow you home. Welcome to People Who Vanished in Appalachian Mountains. People Who Vanished in Appalachian Mountains. Halloween special. I never considered myself easily scared. Outdoorsy was more like it. I've always loved hiking alone, camping under the stars, and testing myself in the wilderness. I like the quiet, the smells of the forest, the way the wind moves through the trees. But the weekend I hiked a lesser-known section of the Appalachian Trail in late October. I realized there are quiets in the woods that aren't peaceful. There's something else entirely. Something that watches. I was 26 at the time, living in Asheville, North Carolina. I'd taken Friday afternoon off work and decided to escape the city for a 2-day solo trip. The trailhead I chose was off Highway 19, a small clearing barely big enough for 5 cars. The sun was low, and the October air had that sharp, cold bite that makes your lungs ache. The smell of wet leaves and pine filled my nose. I checked my backpack, food, water, first aid kit, flashlight, sleeping bag. Everything I needed for a night alone in the mountains. I felt confident, maybe overconfident that the first couple of hours went as expected. Mud squelched beneath my boots, and birds called intermittently in the trees. I even saw a small family of deer cross the trail, their white tails flashing before disappearing into the dense foliage. But as I climbed higher, deeper into the forest, the wildlife seemed to vanish. The quiet started to feel wrong, not natural. Not the kind of quiet that comes with distance from a highway, but a pressing, almost suffocating silence. The kind where every step you take is louder than it should be. By 6:15 p.m., I was beginning to realize I hadn't heard a bird or small animal in at least half an hour. I stopped and listened. Nothing. Even the wind seemed absent. My heartbeat quickened. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was nothing. It's just a forest, I said to myself. Quiet forests exist. But the unease only grew as I pressed on. Then I heard it. A twig snapping behind me. Not faint, not distant close enough to make me spin around. The forest behind me was thick, gray shadows stretching between the trees. I called out, "Hello?" My voice felt tiny, swallowed by the darkness. No answer, nothing moved. I swallowed hard, trying to calm myself, and kept walking. Every few steps I heard it again. Another snap, a faint brush of sound. But when I turned, nothing was there. By 7 p.m., I reached a small clearing near a stream. It wasn't large, maybe 20 feet across, but it was level enough for a tent. I set up my campsite quickly, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. The forest pressed in around me, shadows curling as the last light disappeared. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of wet earth. My hands were shaking slightly as I unpacked my food. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made me tense. I ate my trail mix and jerky, trying to distract myself with mundane tasks. But when I looked across the stream, I thought I saw movement. A figure, hunched slightly, standing perfectly still among the trees. My first thought was a deer or hiker, but it didn't move like anything natural. I froze. The figure didn't step forward, didn't adjust its posture, just watched. I whispered to myself, I'm imagining things. But I knew I wasn't. The figure's stillness was deliberate, unnatural. I tried to focus on my fire, forcing myself to make more light, more warmth. Around 8:30 p.m., I began to notice a faint vibration in the air, a low, humming sound, almost imperceptible at first. It made my teeth tingle, my skin crawl. My chest tightened. I told myself it was the wind, maybe the stream. But the wind was still. The stream was gurgling quietly, no humming there. It seemed to come from the trees, from the shadows, just beyond my sight. The temperature dropped further, and the mist from the stream began to curl around the clearing. I sat closer to the fire, listening. I could hear my own heartbeat, heavy and rapid, each beat echoing in my ears. I told myself to stay calm, to stay rational. But the feeling of eyes on me refused to leave. I kept thinking of the stories I'd read online, people disappearing in the Appalachians. Hikers who never returned, their last known location somewhere in dense, isolated stretches like this one, around 10:15 p.m. I thought I saw the figure again, closer this time, still motionless. My flashlight didn't reach it when I shone the beam, but my eyes caught the outline, a dark silhouette among the trees. I froze, my mind raced. Should I call out? Should I leave? The humming grew louder, now a low, almost musical vibration that made my stomach churn. By 11 p.m., I tried to sleep, curling in my tent with my flashlight across my chest. Every snap of a twig outside made me jump. The mist was thicker now, swirling around the clearing in ghostly tendrils. And then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching. My breath caught. My heart raced like never before. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. The steps stopped. Silence. I didn't dare move for a long time. At midnight, it happened, the whisper. Barely audible, almost a hiss right next to my tent. "Leave." I shot upright, the tent flap trembling in my hands. I threw it open. Nothing. The clearing was empty. No figure, no movement, just mist curling along the stream. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing everything inside without looking back. I ran. I didn't follow the trail. I didn't care where I went. Every shadow seemed to reach for me. Every snapped twig mirrored my own footsteps. I stumbled onto what looked like an abandoned campsite. A tattered tent, broken lantern, footprints leading into the forest. Not mine, not recent. I realized with a chill that the stories were true hikers vanishing, leaving behind nothing but their gear. By 2:30 a.m., I stumbled onto a logging road that eventually led to a small parking area along the highway. My legs were trembling. My hands shook so hard I could barely start my car. I didn't stop driving until I was back in Asheville. I haven't gone near that section of the trail since. Even now, months later, I check forums and news reports. People have disappeared in that same area, sometimes for years. No explanation. No trace. I keep thinking about that figure, hunched and motionless in the shadows, the low humming, and that whisper. I keep wondering what it wanted. Was it human? Something else? I don't know. I do know this. Something is out there in the mountains, waiting in the shadows, watching, and it remembers you. Sometimes, when I drive past the Appalachians, I swear I see it again, just for a second, standing between the mist and the trees. And sometimes, I think I hear that faint humming in the distance, reminding me of that night. I don't hike alone anymore, and I never will. The highway that vanished. I had always been a night owl, someone who found peace driving long stretches of road when the rest of the world was asleep. There's something hypnotic about headlights slicing through darkness. Nothing around you but asphalt, trees, and your own thoughts. I'm 28, work in IT, and often take late-night drives to clear my head. But one night, I discovered there's a difference between quiet solitude and a place where silence hides something waiting to drag you off the map. It was mid-November, around 1:45 a.m., when I left my apartment in Roanoke, Virginia. I had decided on a long drive through the back roads, aiming to reach some small, out-of-the-way diners and towns I'd never been to. My car was full of snacks, water, and a thermos of coffee. The highway was empty at first, the streetlights sparse, the air crisp and biting through my partially opened window. The kind of night where fog curls across the asphalt like fingers. After about an hour of driving on the main road, I turned onto a narrow highway I'd never been on before. It wasn't marked on my GPS, except vaguely, just a thin line disappearing into the Appalachian foothills. The trees were tall, crowding over the road, and I immediately noticed how silent it was. No distant traffic, no wind in the leaves, nothing. It was like driving into a vacuum. The road curved sharply, then straightened out into long stretches I could barely see past the hood of my car. Around 2:30 a.m., I saw something unusual. The highway signs were gone, replaced by plain metal posts. The lines on the road seemed to blur at the edges, faded and cracked, but the asphalt looked freshly laid. I shrugged. Maybe it was just a little used section. But then the fog began. Thin at first, curling along the edges of the road, then thickening. My headlights didn't seem to cut through it entirely. The trees disappeared into it, shadows stretching like they had substance. I slowed down. Something didn't feel right. I checked the GPS. It was still showing a highway, but no nearby towns were listed. The road ahead curved in a way that didn't make sense. I could have sworn I had been on a straight stretch just moments ago. I tried turning back, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly in front of me, the curve behind me swallowed by fog. A cold sweat broke out across my back. Around 2:50 a.m., I noticed movement along the tree line. A figure, maybe 6 feet tall, thin, standing perfectly still, barely visible in the fog. My pulse jumped. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a deer, maybe even a signpost shaped like a person. But then it stepped forward. No, not forward sideways, in a way that looked unnatural. It moved without breaking its stillness, like sliding along the mist. I blinked, and it was gone. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, the leather slick with sweat. The air grew colder. I rolled up my windows, turning the heat on full blast, but the chill seemed to seep through. My headlights caught something on the road ahead. Another car, older, rusted, sitting abandoned in the middle of my lane. No lights, no movement. The driver's door was open slightly, creaking in the windless night. I slowed to a stop, heart pounding. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing, not a sound. I considered moving around it, but as I did, I noticed footprints in the fog, barefoot prints, leading from the car into the woods, then vanishing. My stomach dropped. I decided to keep going, telling myself I had imagined the figure. But the fog thickened. The road signs disappeared entirely. The lines on the asphalt twisted unnaturally, sharp turns that didn't match any map I had ever seen. My GPS showed me moving in circles, the arrow spinning erratically. Panic clawed at my chest. I tried to call 911, but my phone had no signal. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the road behind me was swallowed by fog, as if it had never existed. Around 3:15 a.m., the first real horror hit. Out of the fog, I saw more figures too, then 3, all standing at the edge of the road, unmoving, facing me. I couldn't make out faces, just dark silhouettes. Their presence was suffocating. My chest tightened. My hands shook on the wheel. I thought about accelerating past them, but the road was narrow, and the fog distorted everything. One step forward, one step backward, I couldn't tell. I tried to swerve, and the figures seemed to glide with me, keeping pace without moving their legs. I screamed, slammed on the horn. No reaction. Then the humming started. Low, metallic, almost a vibration in my bones. It seemed to come from the trees, the fog, the road itself. My vision blurred slightly, my ears ringing. I tried to drive faster, but the road curved violently, sending me skidding on wet asphalt. My tires hit mud at the edge of the road, and I fishtailed dangerously close to a tree. My heart was pounding like it would break my ribcage. I realized then that I had no idea where I was, how far I had gone, or if I could even get back. I saw movement again, closer this time. A tall figure stepped directly into my path. I swerved just in time, narrowly missing it. The tires screamed on asphalt, the car fishtailed again. I forced myself to focus, trying to remember how to drive in a panic. I thought about my apartment, my warm bed, the comfort of normal roads. But there was nothing familiar. Just the fog, the cold, and the figures. Around 3:50 a.m., I made a desperate decision. I shut off the headlights, thinking maybe if I disappeared into the darkness, the figures would vanish. For a moment, it worked. The humming stopped. The figures melted into the fog. I breathed, shallow and fast, heart racing. But when I turned the headlights back on, the road ahead was gone. Completely gone. The asphalt ended abruptly, a sheer drop into black nothingness. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop. My stomach lurched. I sat in the car, shaking, trying to understand. The road behind me, the road I had traveled for nearly 2 hours, was gone too, replaced by a wall of fog. The GPS spun in circles. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't go back. I thought I might have gone insane. I tried the horn again, screaming, pounding on the steering wheel. And that's when I saw it, a single figure, standing in the middle of the road ahead. Backlit by some unearthly gray light that seemed to come from nowhere. It didn't move. But I could feel its gaze, heavy and intentional, boring into me. I could almost feel it inside my chest, pressing, weighing down my heart. I rolled up the windows, locked the doors, but it didn't matter. I could hear its breathing. Low, slow, and deliberate. The humming returned, louder this time, vibrating the car, vibrating my skull. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them, it was closer. Too close. I slammed the car in reverse, tires spinning, trying to escape. But the fog seemed to cling to the car like glue. The figures sliding with me no matter which way I turned. Then, as suddenly as it began, the fog thinned. The road straightened out. The highway returned, normal asphalt, familiar lines. My heart was still racing, sweat pouring down my face. The figures were gone. The abandoned car was gone. The humming was gone. I couldn't understand what had just happened. My GPS returned to normal. The world outside looked as it should, silent, cold, mundane. I drove in a daze for an hour until I reached the next town, shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I haven't driven that highway since. Friends think I'm exaggerating. Maybe I am. Maybe I imagined everything. But I have a dashcam, and while it didn't record the figures, the fog seemed to erase them. It did capture something. On the video, for a few seconds, the fog ahead seems impossibly thick, almost unnatural. And if you look closely, you can see dark shadows moving just beyond the edges of the beam, sliding in ways that no human or animal could. I don't know what I experienced that night. I don't know if it was supernatural, psychological, or something else entirely. All I know is that part of that highway doesn't exist anymore, not in the real world, not on any map. People drive those roads now, oblivious, but I'll never go back. And sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear the low humming again. Just faint enough to remind me that it's still out there. waiting for the next person foolish enough to drive too far into the dark. I still take late-night drives occasionally, but I stick to familiar streets now. I've learned that some roads aren't meant to be traveled, some fogs aren't meant to be penetrated, and some figures in the shadows, they don't want to be seen. They want to be remembered. The cabin that knew my name. I never believed in anything supernatural. Ghost stories and urban legends were fine for parties or YouTube videos, but I always thought the fear came from imagination, not reality. That all changed one weekend in early December, when I rented a remote cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains to escape the stress of my job. I was 27, working as a graphic designer, and the idea of a solo weekend, no internet, no responsibilities, seemed perfect. I arrived at the cabin around 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. The sun was low, spilling pale light across the frost-covered trees. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. It was small but cozy, wooden, with a stone fireplace and a single bedroom. There was no cell reception, which I welcomed at first. I unpacked my things, started a fire, and felt that familiar thrill of being completely alone in nature. At first, everything was ordinary. I chopped some wood for the fireplace, cooked a simple dinner, and settled into the cabin with a mug of coffee. Around 7:15 p.m., a faint tapping noise reached me through the walls. I assumed it was a loose shutter or the wind. The cabin creaked naturally in the cold air. I told myself nothing was wrong. But as the night deepened, the sounds became harder to ignore. There were rhythmic taps, slow, deliberate, almost like fingers drumming. They didn't sound outside. They sounded inside the walls, like someone was circling the cabin. Around 9 p.m., I was trying to read, but my focus was shattered by the noise. I muttered, "It's just the house settling," and tried to ignore it. Then came a whisper. Low, breathy, and unmistakable. It said my name. Not my full name, just the one my friends call me. Alex. I froze, coffee halfway to my mouth. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I whispered back, "Who's there?" The cabin answered only with silence. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was stressed, alone, and tired. But then things escalated. Around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. The cabin only had one floor and a loft I wasn't using. The steps were deliberate, heavy, pacing across the floor above me. I grabbed my phone to call my friend, someone, anyone, but no signal. The only light was from the fire, flickering against the walls. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting and leaning toward me. By midnight, I was shaking. I decided to check the loft. I climbed the narrow stairs, flashlight in hand, and saw nothing. The space was empty, untouched, except for a single item I hadn't noticed before. A small notebook, open on the floor. I picked it up. The pages were blank, except for one line scrawled in shaky handwriting. "You shouldn't be here, Alex." My stomach dropped. I spun around. The loft was empty. No footprints, no one hiding. Just the notebook, glowing faintly in the firelight. I ran downstairs, clutching the notebook. The tapping had grown louder, echoing in every corner of the cabin. The whispering resumed. "Alex, leave now. Before it finds you." I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my keys and ran to the car, intending to drive back to town. But when I stepped outside, the forest looked wrong. The trees seemed too tall, too close. The gravel road stretched endlessly into darkness, with no sign of the highway I had driven in on. Panic surged. I jumped into the car and tried to start it. The engine struggled, sputtered, then roared to life. I drove blindly, tires crunching over the gravel, fog rolling in from the trees, wrapping around the headlights. Shadows moved in the periphery, always just out of reach. And then I heard it behind me, the sound of something running, fast, heavier than any human should be. Branches snapped, leaves rustled violently, and a low growl resonated through the air. By 12:45 a.m., I saw a faint light in the distance. Relief surged. Maybe it was the highway, maybe a town. I drove toward it, heart hammering, and the road finally straightened out. I glimpsed the cabin in the rearview mirror one last time, dark, silent, seemingly abandoned. But then my blood ran cold. The notebook had appeared on the passenger seat, open, with new words written on it. "You can't leave." I screamed, swerving, hitting a pothole and throwing my coffee across the dashboard. My hands were trembling violently. I drove faster, praying to see signs of civilization. At 1:30 a.m., I finally reached a small diner at the edge of town. Neon lights flickered, the smell of coffee and grease filling the car. Relief washed over me, and I promised myself I'd never go back. But even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that the cabin remembers me. Sometimes at night, I dream I'm back there. The notebook reappears, my name scrawled across its pages. The tapping returns, and the whispering grows louder, saying things I don't want to hear. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a faint glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my room, tall, hunched, waiting. I never told anyone the full story. People might call me crazy, and maybe I am. But I don't think I am imagining it. That cabin, it wasn't just abandoned. It knew me, it remembered me. And I have no idea how or why it let me leave. The motel room that shouldn't exist. I never thought a motel could scare someone. I had stayed in my fair share of sketchy roadside motels during long drives. But nothing ever prepared me for the night I spent in room 7 of the Red Maple Inn. I'm 29. A freelance photographer who often drives across the Southeast, chasing abandoned buildings for shoots. And this was supposed to be a quick stop on a cross-state trip. I wanted a warm bed and a shower before heading out at sunrise. That's all I thought I wanted. It was late October, around 11:15 p.m., when I pulled off Highway 64 in Tennessee. The sky was dark, and a thin drizzle slit the asphalt. The Red Maple Inn looked old, faded red paint peeling. A single flickering neon sign that read, "Vacancy." The parking lot was empty, except for one other car. An older sedan parked under a dim streetlight. The place smelled faintly of mildew, wet carpet, and something sour I couldn't identify. The front desk clerk was a thin man with deep-set eyes, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. He barely looked up when I asked for a room. 7, he said, handing me a key without a word. The hallways smelled of disinfectant and something rotting beneath the surface. The carpet was threadbare, and the walls were pale yellow, stained with water damage. My footsteps echoed unnaturally as I walked to the room, the only sound except for the faint buzz of the flickering overhead light. Room 7 looked normal at first. A queen bed with floral sheets, a small TV mounted on the wall, a bathroom with cracked tiles. I dropped my bag, turned on the TV, and tried to relax. Around 11:50 p.m., I noticed something strange. The room felt colder than the hallway. Not just chilly, but a bone-deep cold that seeped through my jacket. I shrugged it off, thinking the heating system was broken. But then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the bathroom. I froze. My pulse quickened. "Hello?" I called softly. Nothing. The scratching stopped. I tried to convince myself it was a rodent or maybe a pipe. I even laughed nervously, shaking my head. But the unease settled in my chest like a stone. I unpacked my camera gear and tried to focus on editing photos, but every creak, every drip of water, made me jump. Around midnight, I decided to take a shower. The water was freezing at first, then scalding, then cold again. My nerves were frayed, my body tense. I stepped out, towel wrapped around me, and that's when I noticed the bathroom mirror. Something was written on it. Not with ink or pen, but foggy letters that had appeared as if someone had breathed onto the glass. It said, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. The bathroom was empty. I yelled, "Who's there?" The silence that followed was worse than the writing. My heart was hammering in my chest. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. The sense of isolation hit me like a physical force. I could feel it pressing in on me from the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. By 12:30 a.m., I had locked the door and sat on the bed, trying to calm myself. That's when I noticed the other car in the parking lot. The driver's side door was open now, and the interior light flickered on and off. No one was visible. My stomach turned. I thought about leaving immediately, but something kept me rooted to the room. Fear, curiosity, and disbelief tangled together in a mess of panic. Around 1:10 a.m., the scratching returned louder this time, coming from behind the bedroom door. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep in the car for emergencies and approached cautiously. I opened the door. Nothing, just the hallway dimly lit, silent. But the numbers on the doors. Something was off. Room 7 was there, yes, but it was also across from a different hallway than the one I'd walked down. I swore I had come from the end of the hall, but now the layout seemed twisted, impossible. I stepped back into the room. That's when I heard whispering, faint, urgent, coming from the walls themselves. "Leave before it sees you. Leave now." My hands shook. I looked around and my TV flickered, static filling the screen. From the static, I thought I saw a shadowy figure in the corner of the room, hunched, still, almost impossible to focus on. I blinked. It was gone. My heartbeat felt like it would burst from my chest. Around 1:45 a.m., I made a decision. I had to leave. I grabbed my keys, backpack, and camera gear, throwing everything into the car. The rain had stopped, leaving a cold mist in the air. As I opened the door, I realized the hallway had stretched impossibly long. I walked faster, my footsteps echoing, every creak and drip amplified. When I finally reached the lobby, the clerk was gone. The front desk empty. Not a sign of anyone else in the motel. Just the dim neon sign outside flickering, casting red light into the empty parking lot. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and drove off as fast as I could. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the motel, but something was off. Room 7 was visible, but the window glowed faintly, like light from another world. And for a moment, I could swear I saw a figure standing there, hunched, watching me. I pressed the accelerator harder, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, heart hammering. Even weeks later, I can't stop thinking about that night. I've checked online. The Red Maple Inn doesn't exist. Not on maps, not in business listings, not in any records. I've tried going back, tracing the roads, but I always end up on normal highways, unfamiliar streets, nothing resembling the motel. Sometimes when I'm editing photos late at night, I see something in the corner of a frame, a shadow, a flicker of movement. A hunched figure that wasn't there before. I don't know what I experienced that night. I don't know if it was a hallucination, some glitch in reality, or something else entirely. All I know is that room 7 wasn't normal. And I have the unsettling feeling it still exists somewhere, waiting for someone else to check in. Someone else to see it, to hear the whispers, to feel the cold, bone-deep fear of being trapped in a place that shouldn't exist. I don't stay in motels alone anymore, and I never will. The woods behind my house. I always thought my childhood home was perfectly normal. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Knoxville, Tennessee. The kind of place where the streets were lined with old oak trees, and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. But there was a patch of woods behind my house that everyone avoided. Adults called it dense and untamed, and we kids knew not to go there. Now, years later, I've realized there was more to that forest than just thick trees and shadows. I'm 27 now, and I returned to my hometown one fall to handle some family matters. One evening, around 6:30 p.m., I decided to take a walk down the old streets, remembering the trails I used to ride on as a kid. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and the air smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke from nearby fireplaces. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, the neighborhood unusually quiet. It was almost too quiet. I walked to the edge of the woods behind my old house. The trees were tall, twisted, and blackened at the edges from years of neglect. Leaves had already fallen, leaving the forest floor covered in damp brown and orange needles. Something about the woods drew me in, a mix of nostalgia and unease. I stepped onto the old trail I remembered from my childhood, and immediately the air grew colder. Not just crisp autumn cold, but a bone-deep chill that crept into my chest. By 7 p.m., the light was fading fast. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no rustling animals, nothing. I paused to listen. My own breathing sounded loud, echoing unnaturally through the trees. Twigs snapped behind me, faint but distinct. I spun around, but no one was there. My pulse quickened, and I told myself it was just a deer or maybe the wind. But the feeling of being watched was growing, pressing on my shoulders, my neck, my back. Around 7:30 p.m., I reached a clearing I remembered from childhood. It was where we used to play games, climb trees, build small forts. But tonight, it looked wrong. The ground was wet, but not muddy, more like something had soaked into it and left it dark. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust or blood, and the mist curling between the trees made the clearing seem smaller than I remembered. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, almost swallowed by the trees. No reply. I began to head back toward the edge of the woods, but the path seemed altered, twisted, as if the forest itself had moved overnight. I could have sworn I knew the turns, the landmarks, the small stream we used to cross, but they were gone, replaced by unfamiliar trees and shadows. My heartbeat surged. Twigs snapped again behind me, closer this time. I called out, my voice trembling, "Who's there?" Silence. By 8:15 p.m., I started to run. The deeper I went, the more disoriented I became. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, branches forming shapes that almost looked like figures. I glimpsed something moving at the edge of my vision, tall, thin, hunched, but when I turned, nothing was there. The mist thickened, wrapping around my legs, chilling me to the bone. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the forest seemed to close in, the trees bending in impossible ways. Around 8:45 p.m., I tripped over a root and fell hard, scraping my knees. My hands were shaking as I pushed myself up. That's when I heard it clearly, a low whisper, just beyond the clearing. "Don't leave," it said, soft, almost intimate. My blood ran cold. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the forest. I turned in every direction, flashlight trembling in my hand, and the whisper came again, "Stay with us." Panic consumed me. I ran blindly, branches whipping against my face and arms. My lungs burned, my legs ached, and the feeling of being followed never left. I could hear twigs snapping in a rhythm that matched my steps, always just behind me, always keeping pace. At one point, I glanced over my shoulder and saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. Tall, dark, hunched over. Faces hidden, but I could feel them staring, their presence suffocating. By 9:15 p.m., I saw the edge of the woods. Relief surged. But the forest had changed again. The opening I remembered from childhood was gone. The familiar houses, the streetlights, they had vanished. It was just trees and shadows, stretching endlessly in every direction. I screamed, pounding my fists against a tree trunk in desperation. My voice seemed to vanish into the darkness. Around 9:45 p.m., I stumbled into a small clearing lit by moonlight. There, In the center was a circle of stones. Inside the circle, a faint figure crouched. It turned toward me slowly, and I could swear it. Smiled. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground and into my bones. The figures I had glimpsed before appeared along the edge of the clearing, forming a ring around me. I couldn't move. Fear paralyzed me. My mind screamed for logic, but there was none. By 10 p.m., the figure in the center whispered my name. Alex. Not my real name, but the nickname only my closest family used. My heart stopped. How did it know? How could it possibly know? The figures leaned closer, elongated shadows stretching toward me, and the hum intensified. My vision blurred. My ears rang. I couldn't run. I couldn't scream. I could only stand frozen, the cold gripping my chest like iron bands, and then silence. When I came to, I was at the edge of the woods, my legs scraped, my clothes torn, flashlight dead, and the streetlights of my old neighborhood in sight. It was 11:30 p.m. Everything looked normal. Nothing had moved. The mist was gone. The trees stood as if nothing had happened. But I knew it had. I've never gone back. I can't explain what I experienced. The forest behind my house isn't normal. It's alive in ways I can't understand, and it remembers. Sometimes at night, I think I can hear the whispering again. Sometimes shadows flit at the edge of my vision when I walk past the woods. I don't know if it was supernatural or some trick of the mind, but I do know this. The woods behind my house are patient. And they wait. I don't walk near them anymore, and I never will. The hitchhiker who vanished. I've always been cautious when it comes to strangers, but there are times when circumstance makes you throw caution to the wind. I'm 30, a traveling consultant who drives long stretches of interstate for work, and one night in late October, I made a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. I picked up a hitchhiker. It was around 1:50 a.m. when I was driving along Highway 421, north of Boone, North Carolina. The night was unusually foggy, the kind that drifts across the asphalt like a ghost. The trees were dense, towering over the road, casting long shadows that flickered in my headlights. I was exhausted from a long day, my coffee long gone cold, and the highway almost deserted. Then I saw him, a young man, maybe early 20s, standing at the edge of the road, thumb out, soaked from the light drizzle. I hesitated. I shouldn't have stopped. I knew that. But something about the way he looked, pale, shivering, coat soaked, eyes wide with exhaustion, made me press the brakes. I pulled over slowly. He ran to my car, opening the passenger door before I could even unlock it. "Thanks, I've been walking for miles," he said, voice hoarse, teeth chattering. I asked where he was headed. "Just Boone," he said, vaguely. I nodded and we drove off. The first 10 minutes were quiet, the hum of the engine and tires on wet asphalt, the only sounds. He seemed polite, nervous, avoiding eye contact, staring out the window. The fog thickened, swirling around the car, and I felt a chill settle into my chest. Something about him didn't feel right. Around 2:15 a.m., I tried to make conversation. "Long night?" He nodded, finally turning to look at me. His eyes, I can't describe them fully. Not dark, not light. Just empty. Hollow. I felt it in my stomach. A deep sense of unease. "Where were you walking?" I asked. "Just back there," he said vaguely. Then he smiled, and it was too wide, too perfect. I felt my hair stand on end. The road curved sharply, then straightened into a long stretch through dense forest. I noticed that the trees seemed unnaturally close. I realized I hadn't seen any signs, any mile markers, anything indicating where I was. I glanced at the GPS. It was dead. No signal. I frowned but told myself it was normal in the mountains. I tried to focus on the road, but the feeling of being watched intensified. I stole glances at the hitchhiker, who seemed to be leaning slightly toward me now, whispering under his breath. Around 2:45 a.m., he said something that froze my blood. "You shouldn't be here. Not alone." His voice was calm, casual, but it carried an authority I didn't understand. I swallowed hard. "I'm just driving through," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond, just leaned back, smiling faintly, staring out the window. The fog thickened, wrapping the car in a gray shroud, and the headlights barely cut through it. I noticed movement in the tree shadows that seemed to move in sync with the car. Branches brushing the sides of the vehicle, rustling leaves, snapping twigs. I called out, "Do you see that?" He looked at me, eyes still empty, and whispered, "They're following." My heart pounded. I didn't know what he meant. "Who's following?" I asked. He didn't answer, just leaned back, silent. Around 3:05 a.m., the first real horror happened. I glanced at the passenger seat. He was gone. My body froze, hands gripping the wheel, sweat breaking out across my face. I swerved slightly, breathing fast. Where did you go?" I whispered. The car was silent, the fog pressing in, the forest surrounding me. Then I heard it, a soft tapping like footsteps moving in rhythm with my car. Low, deliberate, unnervingly close. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. No figure. No hitchhiker. Just fog and trees. Panic surged. I tried to accelerate, trying to escape, but the road seemed endless, twisting, stretching unnaturally. The trees leaned closer, shadows pressing toward the car. I could hear faint whispers, indistinct, coming from the darkness. "Leave. You shouldn't be here. It knows." My stomach turned. Around 3:30 a.m., I glimpsed him again, not in the seat, not outside, but reflected in the rearview mirror. His face pale, lips curved into that same wide, impossible smile. His eyes were hollow, and he stared at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I blinked, and he was gone. The tapping continued, now surrounding the car, coming from every direction. I realized with a terror I couldn't describe that I was completely alone, yet not alone. I drove blindly, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, the fog thick, almost tangible. Every turn of the wheel led to another stretch of trees, shadows, fog. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My heart felt like it would burst. I thought of stopping, turning off the engine. But a voice soft whispered, unmistakably his said, "You can't stop now." Around 3:50 a.m., I saw movement on the road ahead. Figures, tall, thin, hunched, moving toward the car, emerging from the fog. I swerved to avoid them, tires skidding on wet asphalt. They moved unnaturally, gliding rather than walking, keeping pace with me. I realized the road itself had changed. It curved in impossible ways. The lines on the asphalt twisted, stretching into infinity, by 4:10 a.m. The tapping turned into pounding, shaking the car as if it had life. The hollow-eyed hitchhiker appeared suddenly in the driver's side mirror. He whispered, low and urgent, "They're hungry. You can't leave." I screamed, gripping the wheel, spinning out of control. The car fishtailed, tires screeching. For a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to crash. But somehow the car straightened. I accelerated blindly, praying to escape. At 4:30 a.m., the fog thinned. The road became normal again, familiar asphalt, highway lines, trees receding into distance. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. My blood ran cold when I realized the seatbelt was fastened, though no one was there. My hands shook violently. I drove in silence for another hour, too scared to even think, until I reached a town with streetlights, coffee shops, and normal roads. I never saw the hitchhiker again. I checked my rearview mirror constantly. I've tried driving that stretch again, Highway 421, but the fog, the trees, the twists in the road, they never reappear. That night, I realized some people or things exist in places that only appear under certain conditions. Some hitchhikers aren't human. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. Even now, months later, I can't stop thinking about him. Hollow eyes, wide smile, whispering warnings I barely understood. And sometimes when I drive late at night, I swear I see him in the fog, standing at the edge of the road, thumb out, waiting. I've never picked up a hitchhiker again, and I never will. The apartment above May. Never thought living in a city apartment could be scary. I'd rented units before in New York and Atlanta, places that were noisy, cramped, and occasionally creepy, but nothing compared to what happened in my new apartment in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm 28, work as a freelance writer, and moved into a modest 2-bedroom unit in an older building near the edge of downtown. I wanted a quiet place to work, and this one seemed perfect, until the first night. It was mid-October, around 11 p.m. when I first heard it. I was unpacking boxes, the room lit only by a small lamp. The apartment smelled faintly of mildew and old paint. The floors creaked with every step, a natural sound in older buildings. But the sound I heard wasn't the floor, it was coming from the ceiling. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, pacing directly above me. I paused, listening. It was probably the tenants above me, I thought. I had been told the unit above was occupied by an older man who worked in night shifts. But the steps continued for hours, even when I went to bed around midnight. Around 12:30 a.m., I started hearing other sounds scraping, like someone dragging furniture across the floor, punctuated by faint thumps and taps. My pulse quickened. I called out, "Hey, can you keep it down?" No answer. Silence. Then the scraping resumed. By 1 a.m., I was lying in bed, trying to ignore it, but the noises grew more distinct. There was a dragging sound, followed by a thump as if something heavy had hit the floor above. Then, a voice. Soft, low, almost a whisper, but unmistakably human. "Get out. Leave now." My heart pounded. I told myself I was imagining it. I live in an old building. Old buildings make noises. People are sleepwalking. Around 1:15 a.m., I decided to investigate. I got out of bed, flashlight in hand, and went to the stairs leading to the unit above. The hallway was cold, the air unusually still. I knocked on the ceiling, shouted, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Nothing. Silence. The floor above remained ominously quiet for a moment. Then the scratching started on the ceiling, directly above me. Short, deliberate scratches like fingernails on wood. My stomach turned. I backed away, flashlight trembling in my hand. By 1:45 a.m., the sounds changed. I could hear faint footsteps moving toward the stairwell, pacing just above me. Then, the floorboards creaked, not in rhythm with walking, but in a staccato pattern, like someone hopping, leaping, or bouncing. My blood ran cold. I called the building manager the next morning, but they insisted the tenant above had been out all night. The second night was worse. Around 11:30 p.m., the apartment grew unusually cold. I tried heating it, but the chill didn't go away. The first noises began again, but this time, I could hear whispers. Not coherent words, just soft, urgent murmurs. "Leave, go." I wrapped myself in blankets, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, but the sounds persisted. The floor above groaned, scratched, and then something heavy fell. A loud thud, followed by silence. Around 12:45 a.m., I could swear I heard someone walking directly above me, slow, deliberate steps circling my bedroom. My heart raced. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. I tried 911, but the line kept dropping. I was trapped, alone, and something alive, I realized, was moving above me. By 1:15 a.m., the activity intensified. Scratching, thumping, whispering, and now footsteps descending. But when I checked the stairwell, the building was empty. I stepped back into my apartment, and that's when I noticed it. The ceiling above my bed seemed to shift, subtly, almost imperceptibly. A bulge, a shadow, a dark stain that wasn't there before. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel it, something watching me from above, just out of sight. Around 1:45 a.m., I tried to sleep, but the noises wouldn't stop. I heard something sliding across the floor above, slow, deliberate. And then, a voice, right above my bed. Clear, distinct, whispered directly into my ear, though no one was there. "You shouldn't be here." My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My flashlight had fallen from my trembling hands, illuminating nothing but the ceiling. The empty room. By 2:10 a.m., I decided I had to leave. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and laptop, and ran out of the building into the cool night air. The street was silent, empty, and I felt relief wash over me. I drove to a 24-hour diner, shaking, unable to eat or speak. I called a friend and recounted everything, but they assumed I was overworked or imagining it. I didn't care. I knew what I had heard. The next day, I checked with the building manager. Unit 3, above mine, had been vacant for months. The records confirmed it. No tenant, no workman, no signs of anyone ever being there. I went back to my apartment that night to retrieve some things, but when I entered, the air felt heavier, colder. The floorboards above were silent, but the shadows seemed thicker. And when I looked up at the ceiling above my bed, I could swear I saw a figure crouched, watching. Just for a moment, gone when I blinked. Even now, months later, I can't stop thinking about it. The noises, the whispers, the figure above my bed. I have no idea what it was. I've moved out, but I still have nightmares. Shadows moving just above me, scratching, pacing, whispering my name. Sometimes when I rent another apartment, I feel that same weight pressing down, the sense of being watched from a ceiling that shouldn't even exist. I've never stayed in an older apartment building alone at night again, and I never will. The gas station that wasn't there. I've been on the road a lot. I'm 29, a long-haul delivery driver, and I've driven thousands of miles across the Southeast. I thought I had seen it all: late-night accidents, strange drifters, and the usual roadside oddities. But one night in October, I encountered something that defied all logic. Something that made me question what's real and what isn't. It was around 2:20 a.m., and I was driving down Highway 221 in rural North Carolina. The rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and reflecting the dim glow of my headlights. I was tired, hungry, and looking for a place to pull off for a coffee or snack. The highway was empty, just my truck cutting through the darkness. That's when I saw the gas station. It was old. The kind of place that looks like it hadn't been updated in decades. Neon pumps, flickering sign, the smell of gasoline mixed with the faint stench of something rotten. The lights were on, a warm yellow glow spilling into the darkness. Relief flooded me, and I slowed to pull in. I parked near a pump, grabbed my wallet, and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, echoing too loudly in the small, dimly lit store. No one was behind the counter. Shelves were stocked with old snacks, faded candy bars, and drinks, but everything looked wrong. Expired, dusty, out of place. I called out, "Hello?" No reply. The air smelled stale, like old cigarettes and damp wood. I shrugged. Maybe the attendant was in the back. I grabbed a soda from the fridge and paid at the counter. No one answered, but the cash register opened normally. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, like something was watching, around 2:35 a.m. I left the store and walked back to my truck. That's when I noticed something strange. My headlights illuminated the pumps, but the road beyond seemed different. The highway was gone. Instead of asphalt stretching into the distance, there were trees, dense, twisted, and shadowed. I blinked, thinking the rain or my exhaustion was affecting my vision. But the forest looked real, thick, impossible to miss. I climbed into my truck, heart racing. I tried to start the engine, but it struggled, coughing, stalling. The tires skidded slightly on the wet asphalt that seemed to end abruptly at the edge of the forest. I jumped out to check. The gas station had expanded somehow, the pumps were taller, the lights brighter, but the highway was completely gone, replaced by shadowy trees. Panic gripped me. Around 2:50 a.m., movement caught my eye. A figure, tall, thin, in a dark coat, standing at the edge of the forest. It didn't move, but I felt it staring. I jumped back into my truck, slammed the door, and tried again to start the engine. It roared to life. I reversed quickly, tires skidding, and the figure vanished. No footprints, no shadow. Just emptiness. I drove forward, hoping to find the highway again, but the road seemed to twist unnaturally. Each turn led me back toward the gas station. The pumps, the lights, the store, they were there again, as if I had never left. My stomach churned. I tried to keep going, but no matter which direction I took, I ended up back at the gas station by 3:15 a.m. Desperation set in. I honked, shouted, waved my arms. No one responded. The fog began rolling in, thick, white, and clinging to the asphalt like a living thing. Shapes moved just beyond my headlights, dark, hunched silhouettes, circling, keeping pace with the truck. I tried to accelerate, but the road twisted, stretched, impossibly long, trapping me in a loop. The lights of the station flickered, casting long shadows. I noticed the door to the store opening and closing by itself. Then I saw them, figures, multiple, emerging from the fog, tall, thin, moving unnaturally. Their faces were featureless, just black voids. My heart hammered, sweat pouring down my back. I screamed, pounded the steering wheel, trying to think, trying to escape, but every instinct failed. Around 3:45 a.m., the humming started. Low, vibrating through the truck, through the road, through me. The figures moved closer, gliding rather than walking. I could feel the air grow colder, denser, heavier. My vision blurred slightly. I realized then that I wasn't alone. Something, more than them, was present. Watching, waiting, patient. By 4:10 a.m., I spotted a faint glow in the distance. Relief surged. Maybe the real highway. I drove toward it, zigzagging, heart pounding, and finally, the fog thinned. Trees receded. Asphalt stretched out normally. The gas station vanished. No sign of it remained. I checked my GPS. It showed normal roads again, mile markers, familiar surroundings. I was back on the real highway. Even now, months later, I can't forget it. The gas station wasn't on any maps. No records, no business license, nothing. But I remember the smell, the flickering lights, the cold air, the feeling of being trapped in a place that shouldn't exist. And sometimes, late at night, when I drive alone, I swear I can see that glow ahead, flickering in the distance, waiting. I've never stopped on an empty roadside again, and I never will. The room that locked itself. I've always been a light sleeper, and I usually travel a lot for work. I'm 31, a consultant who often stays in hotels in small towns across the South. Most of the time, it's uneventful. You check in, do your work, and leave. But one night in late November changed everything for me. Something about that hotel room. I'll never forget it. I arrived at the Pine Ridge Inn around 10:30 p.m. after a long drive from Asheville. It was a small, old-fashioned motel on the edge of town. The exterior looked well-kept but dated dark wood panels, a few flickering lights, the faint smell of damp pine and gasoline from the nearby highway. The lobby clerk was friendly but distracted, handling a phone call while handing me my key. "Room 12, he said. "3rd floor." At the end of the hall, I drove up, parked, and entered the room around 10:45 p.m. The room was small but comfortable. A queen bed, desk, TV, and a small bathroom. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale carpet. I set down my bag, turned on the TV, and started working on my laptop. Around 11:15 p.m., I heard a faint click from the door. I looked up. The key was in the lock, the chain intact. I told myself it was just the old door settling. By 11:30 p.m., I started hearing other sounds, soft thumps, like someone walking inside the walls, followed by the faint scraping of metal on wood. My pulse quickened. "Hello?" I called, my voice low, almost hoping no one would answer. Silence. I tried to focus on my work, but every creak of the floor and drip from the AC vent made me jump. Around midnight, I decided to shower. The water was hot at first, then suddenly cold, then scalding again. My nerves were frayed. After stepping out, I noticed something strange. The door to the room, which I had locked earlier, was now firmly shut. The deadbolt hadn't been engaged. I tugged on the handle locked. I rattled it, but it wouldn't budge. My heart pounded. I called the front desk. No answer. The phone line was dead. By 12:15 a.m., panic set in. I banged on the door, shouted for help, but the hallway remained silent. Then I heard the steps, soft, deliberate, pacing on the floor outside. Not upstairs, not below, but right outside. I could hear the slight creak of the carpet, the subtle thud of movement. Whoever or whatever it was, they were circling the door. My skin crawled. At 12:30 a.m., I tried the window. It wouldn't open fully. Outside, the fire escape was old, rusted, and far too high for a safe jump. My options were disappearing fast. And then, whispering. Low, breathy, coming through the door. "You shouldn't be here. Stay." My hands shook violently as I pressed my ear to the door. The voice sounded impossibly close, inside the room with me, though I was alone. Around 12:45 a.m., the thumping intensified. The door shuddered as if someone or something was trying to push it open. The whispers grew louder, urgent, insistent. "You can't leave. Stay forever." I backed away, trembling, trying to think. My phone was dead, the key useless, the window blocked. I was trapped. And the present something unseen, pressing against the air, the walls. The floor was watching me, patient, alive. By 1:10 a.m., I noticed the TV flicker. Static filled the screen, then images flashed my own face from moments ago, looking terrified, on the screen in real time. My hands flew to my face, stomach dropping. How was this possible? The door rattled violently, then silence. I froze, breath shallow, listening. The whispers stopped. The footsteps stopped. The room was unnervingly quiet. Around 1:30 a.m., I tried again to open the door. It was unlocked now, but slow, resistant, as if it had to decide to let me go. I threw it open and ran down the stairs. The lobby was empty, dark, the night air cold as I burst out onto the parking lot. No cars, no lights except the faint neon of the motel sign. I ran to my truck, heart hammering, and drove away as fast as I could. Even now, months later, I can't shake the memory. The room wasn't normal. It had awareness, a presence. That night, I realized that sometimes the walls themselves can hold something, watch, and trap. I still sleep with all doors unlocked, just in case, and avoid hotels I don't know. But deep down, I know it's still out there somewhere waiting for someone else to check in, to trap, to whisper, I've never stayed in a hotel alone after midnight again, and I never will. The road that disappeared, driven hundreds of miles on isolated country roads, but nothing ever prepared me for what happened on that October night. I'm 32, a freelance videographer who often films nature and abandoned places, and I was returning from a shoot in rural Virginia. The experience that night made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. It was around 11:50 p.m. when I exited a small town and headed onto State Route 89, a winding highway that cuts through dense forests and rolling hills. The air was crisp and damp, leaves rustling in the wind, and the fog was thick, curling across the road like smoke. My headlights barely penetrated the mist, and the radio was static, failing to pick up any signal. I had been driving for hours, tired and craving a place to stop, stretch, and refuel. Around 12:15 a.m., I noticed the first strange thing. The road ahead seemed different, wrong somehow. The familiar lines of the asphalt twisted unnaturally, reflecting my headlights in strange angles. The trees, normally set back from the road, appeared closer, their branches leaning in as if trying to touch my truck. My pulse quickened, but I chalked it up to fatigue. I slowed down, careful to follow the curves. By 12:30 a.m., I realized I hadn't passed a single mile marker in over 20 minutes. The fog thickened, dense and clinging to the truck. A chill ran through me, deeper than the night air should have allowed. Then I saw movement, shadows flitting along the tree line. I blinked, tried to focus, and they vanished. My imagination, I told myself. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. Around 12:45 a.m., I saw headlights in the distance, oncoming. Relief washed over me. I wasn't completely alone. But as the vehicle passed, I froze. The driver's face. It was featureless. Not dark, not obscured, just smooth like a blank mask. I blinked. The truck was gone. My headlights reflected nothing but empty road, fog, and trees. My stomach churned. I pressed the accelerator, trying to put distance between myself and whatever I had seen. By 1:10 a.m., the road had changed again. It was no longer the asphalt I recognized. The texture felt wrong beneath my tires, soft, almost muddy, though my wheels left no marks. The trees leaned impossibly close, shadows pressing in, and the fog seemed alive, curling into shapes that hinted at faces, arms, figures I couldn't fully see. My heartbeat thundered. I told myself I was hallucinating. I was exhausted. I just needed to reach the next town. Around 1:30 a.m., I realized I was lost. Completely. The road twisted in impossible ways, each turn leading me back toward the same stretch I'd passed before. I tried to turn around, reverse, go back, but it was like the road didn't exist behind me. The asphalt, the trees, the lines gone. Just fog, darkness, and the feeling of being observed. By 1:50 a.m., fear consumed me. I could hear something, footsteps, light but deliberate, circling my truck in the fog. Whispering followed, low, almost impossible to understand, insistent. You shouldn't be here. You can't leave. I tried to shout, but my voice seemed swallowed by the fog. My hands shook violently on the wheel. My stomach tightened in panic. Around 2:10 a.m., the first real horror occurred. I glimpsed them, figures in the fog, tall, thin, hunched, moving unnaturally. They had no faces, only hollow voids where eyes should be. I could feel them observing me, closing in, surrounding the truck. I accelerated blindly, tires skidding on the unnatural surface, heart hammering, screaming for them to leave me alone. But every path led back to the same stretch, the same fog-wrapped trees, the same figures. By 2:30 a.m., the fog thickened even more, pressing against the truck like a living thing. The whispers turned into voices, dozens of them, layered over each other, urgent, insistent. Stay with us. Don't leave. I realized then that the road wasn't just gone. It never existed. I was trapped in some kind of loop, some twisted version of reality that shouldn't be possible. Around 2:50 a.m., my truck stalled. The engine coughed and died, leaving me in complete silence, save for the whispers and the soft scraping of movement around me. I got out, flashlight in hand, trying to see through the fog. The figures were closer now, just beyond the beam, gliding rather than walking, circling me like predators. I could feel their presence, heavy and oppressive, pressing on my chest. By 3:10 a.m., desperation took over. I ran, flashlight swinging wildly, shouting, calling their attention, hoping to distract them. The fog seemed to twist and pulse, reshaping itself around me. Shadows lunged from the edges of the light, but when I turned, they were gone. I could hear whispering behind me, always just out of sight, following my every step. Around 3:30 a.m., I stumbled into a clearing, or what looked like one. Moonlight broke through the fog, illuminating a stretch of highway that looked normal. Relief surged through me. I ran toward it, heart hammering, lungs burning. I reached the familiar asphalt, got into my truck, and started the engine. The fog, the twisted road, the figures all vanished. It was as if nothing had happened. By 4 a.m., I had reached the next town. Streetlights, houses, normal roads. I parked at a diner and sat shaking, trying to process what had just happened. My GPS now worked, showing normal roads, normal highways, no trace of the strange stretch of State Route 89. I asked locals about the road, the fog, the stretch I drove through. No one remembered anything unusual. Even now, months later, I can't shake the memory. The whispers, the faceless figures, the road that disappeared. It wasn't exhaustion, not entirely. Some part of me knows it was real. That night, I realized that some places, some roads, exist only under certain conditions, with dangers that don't belong in our reality. I've avoided traveling alone at night ever since. I never drive down isolated back roads. I never travel State Route 89 after dark, and I never will.